In this video, we're going to talk about coincidences. In our lives, we encounter some coincidences. One of the coincidences that might have happened to all of us is meeting someone in a place where we didn't expect to see them. Sometimes, these coincidences can be even stranger than that. And of course, the rarer the occurrence, the stranger the coincidence seems. Today, we're going to showcase 10 of the strangest coincidences that have happened in history. Why are these coincidences strange? Because you'll see for yourself how incredibly rare the events we're discussing are. So, let's begin. Number 10. The day of King Louis XVI of France. When King Louis XVI was a child, specifically at the age of 6, an astrologer predicted that the 21st day of each month would bring him misfortune. As he grew up, King Louis took the astrologer's words to heart and canceled all his appointments and activities. On the 21st of every month, he would just stay home and do nothing on that day. However, as they say, what's meant to be will be. On June 21, 1791, the king and his wife were arrested during the outbreak of the French Revolution. On September 21st of the same year, France abolished the monarchy, which had protected the king, and the country became a republic. Finally, on January 21, 1793, King Louis XVI was executed by guillotine. Unfortunately, caution didn't help the king, and indeed, his worst days were the 21st. Number 9. What goes around comes around. There was a man from Texas named Henry Ziegland. In 1893, he decided to end his relationship with his longtime girlfriend. After the breakup, she became severely depressed and took her own life. When her brother found out, he was furious and decided to take revenge. He took his gun and went to Henry Ziegland's house, shot him, and then turned the gun on himself and committed suicide. What the brother didn't know was that the bullet didn't hit Henry, but missed by millimeters, and lodged in a tree behind him. 20 years later, Henry decided to cut down that same tree, but couldn't do it by hand. So he decided to blow it up. The explosion caused the bullet to be propelled out of the tree, and it struck Henry in the head, killing him instantly. Number 8. Taxi in Bermuda, 1975. In 1975, a man was riding his motorcycle and, while turning at an intersection, was hit by a taxi and died in the accident. A year later, the man's brother was riding the same motorcycle and, while turning at the same intersection, was also hit by a taxi and died. What's even stranger is that the taxi that hit the first brother was the same taxi that hit the second brother, driven by the same driver. And if that's not enough, the passenger in the taxi was the same passenger in both accidents. Can you imagine that? In the 19th century, writer Edgar Allan Poe wrote a story about four shipwreck survivors who, after severe suffering and hunger, decided to draw lots to see who would be eaten by the others. The unlucky young man who lost was the youngest, named Richard Parker. Years after this story was published, a yacht named the Mignanet sank. Four people survived the shipwreck and were stranded in a small lifeboat. After being stranded and starving, the three older survivors killed and ate the youngest boy among them, who was 17 years old. And guess what his name was? Exactly, Richard Parker. The writer commented on this incident, saying it was the strangest event he had ever encountered. Number 6. Finnish twins in Jive Eskile to 002. In 2002, two Finnish twin brothers were riding their bikes when, unfortunately, a truck hit them, and they both died. The strange part is that these were two separate incidents that happened on the same day, on the same street, 2 hours apart. The second brother didn't know about the first brother's accident and died without knowing. Number 5. The King's Doppelganger. In 1900, King Umberto I of Italy went to a small restaurant for dinner. He was surprised to find that the restaurant owner was an exact copy of him in appearance. After talking, they discovered more similarities. Both were born on March 14, 1844. In the same city, both married women named Margarita, and the restaurant owner opened his restaurant on the same day King Umberto took the throne. If all that wasn't enough, on July 29th of the same year, the restaurant owner was shot dead. And on the same day, King Umberto was also shot and killed. Number 4. The twins. There are many fascinating stories about twins. Our next intriguing case involves twins named James Springer and James Lewis, who were separated at birth and adopted by different families with no connection to each other. Both families named the boys James. Despite having no contact with each other, the twins lived remarkably similar lives. Both worked in law enforcement, both had carpentry skills, both married women named Linda, had sons named James, and divorced their wives to marry women named Betty. Both also owned dogs named Toy. They discovered all these similarities after meeting in 1979 when they were 39 years old. Number 3. The same crime 157 years apart. Barbara Forrest and Mary Ashford were two young women who lived in the small village of Erdington, in Britain. Both were 20 years old when they were found murdered after being assaulted. The strange part is that the two crimes were separated by 157 years, with the first occurring in 1817 and the second in 1974. What makes it even stranger is that the bodies were found in the exact same place, and on the same date, March 27th, but 157 years apart. In the first crime, the man accused was named Thornton. The second man accused, also named Thornton, was acquitted as well. Number 2. A novel predicts the sinking of the Titanic. After discussing the story of the rescued people who turned to cannibalism, here's another novel whose events eerily matched reality. In 1898, author Morgan Robertson published a novel titled The Wreck of the Titan, which depicted the sinking of a luxurious and massive ship named Titan. What's strange is that the events in the novel bore a striking resemblance to the sinking of the Titanic. The similarities start with the ships' names, Titan in the novel and Titanic in real life. Both ships were British, both were called unsinkable, both measured around 150 meters in length, and both set sail from the same place, Newfoundland. They both sank in the middle of the night in April, about 650 kilometers from Newfoundland, and both hit an iceberg. All these similarities lead one to think it couldn't just be a coincidence. Number 1. Major Summerford. The story might be the most unlucky story you'll hear. Major Summerford was fighting in the Battle of Flanders during World War I in 1918, when he was struck by lightning, paralyzing him from the waist down. 6 years later, he retired and moved to Vancouver, Canada. One day, while fishing, he was struck by lightning again, paralyzing his right side. 2 years later, he miraculously recovered and could walk again. 4 years later, he was struck by lightning a third time, leaving him completely paralyzed until he passed away. The likelihood of being struck by lightning is about 1 in a million. So imagine being struck 3 times. Even after his death, his bad luck continued as a fourth lightning bolt struck his grave, shattering the tombstone.